So I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Florida Gators spring practice starts this weekend, and the team has a ton of unanswered questions, and we're going to get into it here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We're available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. Happy Thursday. I'm Brandon Olson. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon, written work with Whole Nine Sports, Giants Country, and NFL 33. And talking about spring practice, because spring practice does open on Saturday for the Florida Gators. There are a lot of unanswered questions, but to me, at least, and I think to the huge majority of Gator Nation, quarterback one is probably the biggest question mark, because I don't know if you know this, but quarterback is a pretty important position to play on the football field. And the Florida Gators in 2020 had Kyle Trask. In 2021, had Emory Jones. In 2022, had Anthony Richardson. And in 2023, we'll have Graham Mertz or Jack Miller III. And I've said this before, and my stance on it hasn't changed before. I don't care who gets the start. I'm more comfortable with Graham Mertz being the starter over Jack Miller III. But here's the thing that I think a lot of Gators fans aren't taking into account here. When you look at Graham Mertz, you've got a multi-year starting quarterback, which whether or not you think those were good years or productive years or the tape was good, whatever it might be, plenty of experience. And when stuff hits the fan, you want someone with experience, with leadership, and with that ability to take over. And I'm not saying Jack Miller doesn't have that leadership quality. I'm saying that Graham Mertz's resume is stronger in that area. Physically, I genuinely don't think there's a huge difference between these quarterbacks. I think Jack Miller III is more athletic, but I don't think he's athletic enough to where you call him a legitimate dual threat. Like, this isn't comparing Graham Mertz to someone with Anthony Richardson's athletic ability, or even not as athletic as Anthony Richardson. This isn't comparing Graham Mertz to someone with Emory Jones's athletic ability. This is comparing Graham Mertz to someone with slightly more athletic ability than he has. So it's not a huge difference changer. You're not going to have to change the entire offense just because you changed your quarterback. None of that. So that's kind of a non-factor for me, because it's also one of those things where being elusive in the pocket is what matters, or not even being elusive, just being able to extend plays is important. You can do that without being super athletic. You could do that just by sensing pressure and having a feel for that. So that's not a difference maker. Being able to be involved as a quarterback in the run game is nice to have, but obviously you're going to prioritize the quarterback that makes your passing game better. Whether or not you think that's Graham Mertz or Jack Miller III, we'll find out. We'll see. The spring game this year is probably going to be way more impactful than it was last year, because last year I feel like it was just I feel like it did nothing, because I feel like most of us were in, okay, Anthony Richardson is going to be the starting quarterback camp at that time. We'll see what happens with Graham Mertz and Jack Miller III now until the spring game. But for the most part, last year we kind of knew what it was. This time it could actually be a big determining factor in how the starting quarterback battle works out. Looking at another reason that you kind of have both of these guys come in with a clean slate, Graham Mertz coming in from a different offense, coming in from an offense that was stuck in 1906, coming from a just very different situation where now he's not going to be handing the ball off 60% of the time. He's going to be handing the ball off probably closer to 52% of the time and throwing it the rest of the time. So this is a brand new offense for Graham Mertz to get involved in. This is going to be a different looking Graham Mertz, not even because he's made these significant strides, but because the offense is going to look different. You're going to see way more snaps from the shotgun or the pistol as opposed to so many under center that he took with Wisconsin, because Wisconsin's like, hey, we're going to put 5 offensive linemen on the field, a tight end that's basically a 6th offensive lineman, a fullback, and a big running back, and we're going to line up under the eye, and we are going to run that mother trucker down your throat. Florida wants to run the ball a lot too, but they're going to do it out of the pistol or out of the shotgun. So that's also different because it's also going to put Graham Mertz in a better opportunity to succeed as a passer because he doesn't have to drop back from under center. He's already got a little bit of a stop, and he could take his little drop steps and make his read and get the ball out quickly if he can do that successfully. It's also just different because you're no longer turning your back when you're running play action, which I will say, I understand the thought process of when you run play action, you want to be able to keep your eyes on the field. You want to be able to read things. Yes. But it's also so disrespectful to the traditional under center bootleg. Like, I know Graham Mertz isn't probably going to find a ton of success with that, but like, Peyton Manning scored rushing touchdowns by going under center with a boot and just having wide open space. So come on, like that's stop disrespecting that part of and that's the only thing that I'm going to say I like about Wisconsin's offense. That's the only thing, but it's a cool thing. Don't disrespect it. So Graham Mertz, Jack Miller, also completely clean slate because Jack Miller, like I've talked about multiple times, people want to hold the Las Vegas Bowl against him. And I just don't think you can do that in good faith. Because again, Jack Miller was someone who, for the entire season, was injured. He had surgery on his thumb, couldn't grip a football, couldn't practice. And I've talked about this before. This isn't like, he banged up his ankle or something where he could still make the throws, or it's not his non-throwing shoulder or his non-throwing arm injury. This was directly to him being able to throw the football and get into a rhythm with receivers. So he didn't have that rapport. He didn't have any practice really to begin with going into the bowl game. He wasn't expecting to start because by the time that he was healthy, he was QB3. It was Anthony Richardson as QB1, and Anthony Richardson, of course, declared for the NFL draft where he will be an early first-round pick. And then he opted out of the bowl game, which was very smart for him. And Jalen Kitna, who, of course, got arrested and then dismissed from the program and the university. And so Jack Miller was kind of thrown into the starting pile. Add on to that, he's missing one of his top 2 receivers in Justin Shorter. He's missing the best offensive lineman, the best guard in the country, maybe the best offensive lineman in the country, O'Cyrus Torrence. And he was working with a playbook that was so high school style. I don't know really what that was with Billy Napier calling the offense in the bowl game, but that offense looked like high school offense. So this is just 2 QBs coming in with a perfectly clean slate. Because even last year, the QB battle, most of us knew Anthony Richardson was going to start going into the battle no matter who he was going against. And then it just became Anthony Richardson. It was like, okay, yeah, like that was expected. So this is 2 QBs going into this quarterback battle with completely clean slates. And Florida needs to find an answer for who their starting quarterback is going to be for the 2023 season. But there's also many positions that need to be filled because there was so much roster turnover, which we're going to get into. But first, today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. And do you like how yesterday I was like, I'm gonna tell you what my parlay is, and it's gonna hit, and then it didn't at all. Yeah, that was super fun. But hey, it's still fun to do. New customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 in bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/locked-on to learn more. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We're available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. And at the end of last segment, I kind of alluded to there's way more roster turnover than just at quarterback. And that is true. You're looking at even like depth too is completely different now. The transfer portal changed this roster completely. Florida had 20 incoming high school players, 10 transfer portal players incoming. Okay. They lost a bajillion players to the transfer portal this offseason. I believe the number is actually like 27 or 28. So there was that much change where your running back depth different. Your starting quarterback is going to be different, obviously, also from the transfer portal, Graham Mertz. Running back depth is going to be different because you still got Trevor Etienne and Montrell Johnson, but you lost Naquan Wright, you lost Lorenzo Lingard. You also added Cameron Carroll. Your tight end room is probably the least impacted room by transfer portal, NFL draft, and high school recruiting because you didn't bring in a 2023 kid, although you could argue Tony Livingston is basically a 2023 commit. You didn't lose anybody to the NFL draft. And the guys you lost to the portal, if I'm not mistaken, the only people who were classified as a tight end that you lost to the portal were Nick Elksnis and Griffin McDowell. So not a ton of impact considering Griffin McDowell, I believe, only played in the Eastern Washington game. And Nick Elksnis barely played and, of course, had the tweet during halftime of, I think it was the Georgia game, which, yeah. Receiver room, you lost Justin Shorter. You lost Dejon Reynolds, who is probably going to step into a larger role. You lost a lot of guys, and you brought in 3 very good freshmen. 3 freshmen that pretty much Gator Nation unanimously is very high on, which is weird because Gator Nation almost never agrees on things, but pretty unanimously, they agree. Wide receivers that came in for the 2023 class, we love them. Okay. Offensive line, obviously a ton of turnover. The only true starter that's carrying over to 2023 is Kingsley Eguakun. Austin Barber was a rotational and spot starter, so he's not considered a true starter here. And Kingsley Eguakun was arguably, if you even want to argue it, the worst offensive lineman, the worst starting offensive lineman from this group. You lost Ethan White and Michael Tarquin, both to USC. O'Cyrus Torrence is going to maybe be a first-round pick. We'll say top 40 pick. He should be top 40. I think we can agree on that. Richard Garage, NFL draft. That's your whole offense is going to look very different just based on depth and starters changing. Players who are getting bumped up the depth chart because of outgoing transfers. You know, we weren't necessarily talking about some guys as starters that might be talked about as starters because of the transfer portal or not even as starters, just being second string because of the transfer portal. But that's where we're at now. And there's also just so much change on the defensive side of the football because a ton of people left. Both your starting safeties, NFL draft. Both your starting off-ball linebackers, NFL draft. One of your starting defensive tackles, NFL draft. Like starting Jack at the start of the year, kicked off the team. Ton of change there. Freshman class is huge and very highly rated and very highly regarded. And guess what? They're probably going to contribute early. TJ Searcy, like I know that I spoke about this a couple weeks ago where I was like, hey, TJ Searcy is someone who's probably going to be playing Jack. Probably won't play much this year. That dude added weight quickly when he got to Gainesville. Like he added weight quickly. There was a video that came out with him and Shamar lifting that came out on, I believe it was Tuesday. And it was an awesome video to see. TJ Searcy looks jacked considering what he looked like in high school. So he's probably going to find some playing time at Jack, which is an incredibly thin position right now on this roster. Incoming transfers, Cam Jackson, Caleb Banks, who's going to rise at D tackle? Manny Nunnery, Taraja Mitchell, Deuce Spurlock, who's going to rise as an off-ball linebacker? Stuff like that. Cam Carroll, what's his role? So much of this roster turnover just leads us with so many questions for the Florida Gators. And I know that they're questions that I myself have and many others have in Gator Nation because it's just an unknown. It's what's going to happen. I don't know. We'll find out. Like, so there's so much question or so many questions because of this roster turnover that I've said it's hard to project what the Florida Gators are going to do in 2023, what their win total is going to be. Is this going to look like a 4 or 5 win team? Is this going to look like a 9-win team? We don't know, because not only do we not know the depth chart yet, which we won't know the depth chart really, but not only do we not know the depth chart, we don't know what these guys are going to look like in this offense, who's going to be the starting quarterback. We don't know just how drastically different the defense is going to look under Austin Armstrong, which we'll get to in a second. We don't know so much that it's so hard to project. And that's like half the fun of this, right? That's my favorite part of the offseason, is going, someone's got to rise, right? And if they don't, then we're really screwed. But that's my favorite part, and obviously, well, I'll say my second favorite part, because we all know, and as Gators fans and listeners like to remind me, I am a nerd. That's fine. And the coaching changed, and coaching matters a ton in football, and to me, just as a nerd. So what changed there? We're going to talk about it right after a quick word from our sponsors. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. To wrap up today's show, and by the way, thank you for liking, subscribing, comment, reviewing. Appreciate you being here. But to wrap up today's show, coaching changes are the next biggest thing that are an unknown going into spring practice. And we're going to start with this. Right now, at the time of recording this, Florida does not have a wide receivers coach hired, does not have a tight ends coach hired. Again, at the time of recording this Wednesday evening, no tight end coach, no wide receiver coach hired. Spring ball starts in 2 days. So, yeah, that's a cause for concern. But I will also say, I think that it's being a bit overplayed and a bit exaggerated about not having those position jobs filled yet, for a couple of reasons. One, this is a massive staff that the Florida Gators have. You've got people who can help out and can kind of shoulder the load for now. Hell, wide receivers, you know who used to be a wide receiver coach? Billy Napier, literally your head coach, Alabama wide receivers coach. He can handle it for spring practice. He can handle that, okay? Not concerned about that. Tight end coach, I genuinely don't even know how good of an actual position coach William Peagler was. I've always thought of him as just an extension of the recruiting class, but give him position coach because, hey, that makes you look a bit better. That gives you more experience. That gives you more pay and allows us to keep you on board, because William Peagler, running back coach at Michigan State, tight end coach with the Florida Gators. Do you know what he's doing now when he joined Patrick Toney with the Arizona Cardinals? Because I know a lot of people were like, oh, Patrick Toney hiring a defensive guy, and then he's bringing an offensive guy with him. William Peagler is now a defensive assistant for the Arizona Cardinals. So that's yet another guy where not doing the job. That's like another reason where I'm like, hey, I really don't think it was that big of a loss at tight end coach specifically. I think it was a big loss on the recruiting trail. But at the same time, we're talking about position coaches during spring. So yes, it's important to have those needs filled. But I also think right now, you're okay with it. Like David Decker is my guy that I want to get hired as the wide receivers coach. Put Eric Kiesau at tight ends coach. Figure that out. But I don't think you should rush into it just because spring ball starting, we need guys there. I'd rather go, okay, yeah, the first week of spring practice, we didn't have our wide receiver coach or our tight ends coach. But we went through the process and we hired a guy that we're comfortable with at both of those spots. Hell yeah, then sure, because I'm not going to care if long-term it's better for the team. So yeah, also again, massive coaching staff, ton of assistants that can pick up the slack a little bit. And they saw Kerry Colbert do it last year. Whatever William Peagler did last year, they saw William Peagler do that last year. I'd like to think that they can kind of pick up that slack again, especially if you distribute it throughout, 3 assistants at that position, then great, you're fine. And also, I don't know if this is just me putting too much stock into it, but I could absolutely see Billy Napier going, because I know right now they're still doing wide receiver coach interviews. So I'd imagine that Billy Napier, if the Florida Gators go into spring practice without a wide receivers coach or without a tight ends coach, Billy Napier will use that time to evaluate potential internal hires there. He'll look at David Decker and go, okay, look, you've got at least the first couple of days as the wide receiver guy right now. Let's see how you do with it. And kind of use that to determine, yep, he's our guy, or nope, he's not ready yet. Great. Defensively, how is the defense going to look? How different is it going to look? Because that's still been my question with Austin Armstrong. Is Austin Armstrong blitzed 40% of the time with Southern Miss? Is he going to blitz less with the Florida Gators because he's got better players? Is he going to blitz more with the Florida Gators because he's got better players? Because he's like, okay, well, now I have better players, so I can get more aggressive because on the back end, they're going to be better in coverage, so I can be more aggressive with it. Is he going to blitz the same because he's like, hey, I like blitzing 40% of the time. That's what I like doing. Sue me. So how is that going to change? How is this how are the defensive players going to adapt to it? And I will say this also, because I've been on the show and I've been saying, yes, Austin Armstrong and Patrick Toney are similar defenses, but Austin Armstrong is considerably more aggressive. How is that going to impact things? And I've had comments that are basically saying it's almost the same defense, so it's not difficult to carry over. Y'all know this isn't Madden, right? Like we're not playing PS5 right now. This is a new playbook, new terminology, new ways to be taught how to do the same thing. Like I've played different spots with cover three, or I played cover three at different spots, and I've had different places tell me this is how we play it here. Florida plays it differently than other places as well. So that's different. Also, it's like there's new terminology in terms of Madden. You just click cover three sky. Coaches aren't going out there and going, go cover three sky, and just yelling that to their players. No, they have specific terms to classify and identify what they want to do on that play. So they have to learn that. And what if there's a similar term? You know, what if I don't know. What if I say I'm looking at, what if I say can as that's my cover three cloud, and then I say ban as my cover three sky? That, or a different defense says cover three ban, or says ban for cover three sky, and it's like, well, now we're all confused because similar sounding words mean completely different things, and junk like that. That's a horrible example, but it's what I'm throwing together off the top of my head to kind of paint this picture for you. So yes, it's a similar defense schematically and down to its foundations, except it's more aggressive than Patrick Toney's was. But you still have to learn the playbook. You still have to learn the terminology. You still have to learn how to play it the way that Austin Armstrong wants you to play it, which may or may not be different from how Patrick Toney wanted you to play things. So yes, it's going to be different. Like, that's going to be a change that happens. How will the defense adjust to it? We'll find out, evidently, but that's what I'm talking about when I say learning this new defense, because same, but different. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We're available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Florida Gators football. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC, hosted by Chris Gordy of Sports 790. Get the best coverage on the best conference, including the best university, the University of Florida. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olson. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Whole Nine Sports, Giants Country, and NFL 33. And I will see you all tomorrow.